When you say Counter-Strike, you automatically think of one thing: defusing the bomb. You think of Dust 2, Mirage, Inferno, and the legendary fight for site control. But if we rewind the clock all the way back to the summer of 1999, the game looked completely different. On June 19, 1999, Min Guzman and Jess Cliff released Counter-Strike Beta 1.0. Back then, there was no C4, there were no bomb sites. In fact, the DA_ prefix hadn't even been invented yet. It all came down to a single game mode: hostage rescue. Beta 1.0 launched with exactly 4 maps: CS_prison, CS_1 depot, CS_mansion, and CS_siege. Today, we're taking a deep dive back to 1999. We're going to dissect these maps, talk about the absolutely insane mechanics that were wiped from the game, and find out why one of the most beloved maps in CS history was deleted and re-added by the developers over and over again. Let's start with the elephant in the room: CS Mansion. If you spent even a single hour in an internet cafe in the early 2000s, this map is permanently burned into your DNA. The map was created by Magnus Lind. A brilliant piece of trivia is that Jess Cliff, the co-creator of CS, actually approached Magnus after seeing a map he had made for Team Fortress Classic. Initially, Magnus refused because he was busy with university, but he quickly changed his mind. CS Mansion was revolutionary for its time for a few reasons. First, in the counter-terrorist spawn, there were 2 fully functional security cameras, one showing the front yard, the other the upstairs of the house. Players could literally spy on the terrorists on the monitors before pushing. Furthermore, it was the first map in the history of the game where every room had a light switch. You could actually shoot them to turn off the lights and hide in the pitch black. But the design itself, it was a meat grinder. CTs spawned outside and terrorists inside. There were no complex flanking routes, just a direct siege. The walls of the house felt like they were made of wet cardboard, so the metagame quickly devolved into shoot through the walls at random until you kill something. But what makes the story of CS Mansion truly legendary is the love-hate relationship the developers had with it. The map was included in Beta 1.0 and was by far the most played. But just 2 months later, in August 1999, alongside the release of Beta 2.0, Guzman and Cliff decided to completely remove it from the game. The reason? They felt it was too chaotic, horribly unbalanced, and didn't fit the tactical, methodical direction they wanted for Counter-Strike. The community rioted. People wanted Mansion back. So, caving to fan pressure, CS Mansion made a triumphant return in September 1999 with Beta 3.0. In Beta 3.0, the map got an update, new spawns, and noticeably warmer lighting to replace the gloomy tone of the first version. But the peace didn't last. By November 1999, with the launch of Beta 4.0, it was cut again. And this time, it was gone from the official rotation for good, though its spirit lived on in legendary community follow-ups like CS Estate. If Mansion was the definition of simplicity, CS Siege was pure ambition. Created by Justin and Othing de Jong, this is widely considered the true flagship map of Beta 1.0. The map was massive. Counter-terrorists started on a bridge overlooking a deep canyon and had to infiltrate an underground complex. You could take the sewers, or you could take an agonizingly slow elevator, which almost always became a death trap. But the most mind-blowing feature in the early versions of CS Siege was the presence of a drivable vehicle. You heard that right. In '99, in Counter-Strike, you could pile into an APC and drive it. Technically speaking, the vehicle used the train mechanics from Half-Life, so it essentially moved on an invisible track at the push of a button. It was a buggy, chaotic nightmare. More often than not, you'd end up running over your own teammates. The feature was removed pretty quickly, but it remained a defining moment for the creativity possible in the Goldsk engine. The creator of this amazing map, Justin de Jong, tragically passed away in 2000 at just 18 years old. But his legacy is eternal. CS Siege survived through many iterations of Counter-Strike, proving just how much talent existed within the fan base. The remaining two maps from Beta 1.0, CS Prison and CS1 Depot, weren't quite so lucky. They were clunky experiments. CS Prison and CS1 Depot Weapon Depot had incredibly messy layouts. They completely lacked the flow that made CS famous. Players would constantly get lost, and firefights felt frustrating and awkward. As a result, both maps were instantly dropped when Beta 2.0 rolled around and were never included in an official version again. They simply faded into history. And speaking of how the game changed, if you played on these maps back in Beta 1.0, you wouldn't have the arsenal you're used to today. There was no AK-47, there was no Desert Eagle, you only had the M4A1, USP, Glock, MP5, a shotgun, and the G3A SG-1 sniper. It wasn't until Beta 2.0 that iconic weapons like the AK-47 and Deagle were added. In Beta 3.0, the P90 made its first appearance, and surprisingly, it wasn't until Beta 3 that players were actually given a knife. In the very first versions, if you ran out of ammo, you literally had no way to attack. Beta 2.0 also introduced night vision, which was actually incredibly useful back then because the maps were pitch black compared to modern CS2. The romantic era of rescuing hostages dominated the first 5 months of the game's life. It wasn't until Beta 4.0, released in November '99, that Guzman and Cliff introduced the defusal mode alongside new maps like Da Dust and Da Nuke. From that moment on, CS found its true competitive calling, and the original CS maps took a back seat in tournaments. Still, without those crazy experiments, without the cardboard walls of Mansion and the broken cars of Siege, it's highly likely the biggest shooter in the world wouldn't have survived its first year. Did you ever get the chance to play these early CS versions at LAN cafes, or did you start out with CS 1.6, Source, or Go? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to read your stories. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more deep dives into gaming history. Until next time, GL and HF.